It was a bad meltdown in Cleveland, so what did we think about it? We'll tell you in this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can find us on wherever you get your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts. We're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you are a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me, well, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB. I do some hosting, co-hosting, and some producing as well. So I stay pretty busy in the sports world in general. But when you come to this podcast, when you click on this link, you're going to get 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. And today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. If you're worried about finding the right part, well, worry no longer, because eBay Motors is going to have you covered every single time. And we have more on them coming up in about 10 to 15 minutes or so. Again, questions and comments can always be left to me on Twitter, or they can be left to me on the YouTube channel. Might not always be the quickest to respond to them on YouTube, but I'll always try my best to get to every question that is sent my way. Now, didn't have an episode yesterday. I apologize about that. I was out of town for work and got in a little bit late. So by the time I was really ready to record, it was about 12:30. So I thought to myself, why not just get up a little bit early? We're going to have a show this morning, and then we will have a show tonight after the game. So 2 episodes today. Going to make sure you're covered on that front. I know it's been a little bit chaotic and hectic over the last 3 weeks. Finally got the laptop situation, the camera situation figured out again. So definitely happy about that. But I do apologize for not getting a reaction last night to the game. Just again, was too late by the time I went to go and record and get everything all handled, because most of the time with the podcast and the editing and the uploading, I mean, it can take a little bit of time. So if I start too late, well, then maybe it's not the best time to post that episode. So I thought, why not just get it out in the morning so some people can have their episode, listenership or episode viewership in the morning, having some coffee, having some breakfast. And then later on tonight, whether the Royals win or lose, I will have it up in time. It's not going to be too late because the game's at 5:40. So hopefully around 9:30 or 10, we'll have another episode up tonight. So 2 of them coming your way today on Locked On Royals. So let's dive into last night. Certainly frustrating. And I think from the reactions I was receiving on Twitter, one of those games that drove people to the edge, that really made you rip your hair out because of how this game started, what the situation felt like against an opponent like this, a damn good one, and the Cleveland Guardians. Everybody knew how important this series was. And after the first 4 innings, or maybe 3 innings, I should say, or let me take that back, 4.5, because after 3 innings, it was only 3-0. After 4.5, it was 5-0 with the Royals. And Seth Lugo's on the bump. He had 3 perfect innings to start the game. I would have put all of my money down. I would have put all the chips in on the Royals winning that baseball game. Seth Lugo had been just electric on the road. Maybe not so much electric, because I kind of compare that to a lot of swing and miss. He has gotten that on the road. That started in Anaheim, that started in Detroit, that started in Tampa. Got a lot of swing and miss. But last night, I just didn't really feel like after the 3rd inning he had his best stuff. And it's also going up against a really good lineup that Cleveland has. And not all of those names you're going to recognize, but that top half of the lineup is really hard to put away. And that's not to make excuses. I mean, Seth Lugo wasn't going to have 30 starts this season and 28 of them were going to be quality starts. It's just not realistic. Not for somebody who was only in his 2nd full season of being a starter, But still, last night, there's no excuse. No excuse whatsoever. And I kind of found it funny on Twitter when somebody reached out to me and said, I wish you would go off on a loss like tonight. And again, there are going to be situations and instances this year where I may not be as kind. I may not be as reserved when talking about something or talking about an implosion. I kind of felt like I towed that line after the Royals lost to Milwaukee in that Willie Adames game. And, last night, certainly going to make you frustrated and angry because now you start to think, oh boy, what's this series going to go like? I mean, how many more 5-0 leads are you going to be able to have on Cleveland? And you have Brady Singer and Daniel Lynch going in game 2 and game 3. Singer is coming off a start in which he didn't actually make it because of a stomach bug or whatever it was. And then Daniel Lynch is only making his third start of the season on Thursday. So what's your confidence level there? It just felt like on Tuesday night, you let one slip. And you let the one that you needed badly slip away. I mean, the Royals offense, who we'll talk about in the final segment this morning, they look good. 5 runs in 4.5 innings, 3 home runs off a guy they traditionally struggle with. I couldn't have asked for much more. Bobby Witt Jr. had 2 home runs. Hunter Renfroe had homered. Salvi had walked. Garcia had 2 hits. Like, it was all looking like the makings of not a blowout, but a comfortable win when you had your league leader in ERA on the bump. But they melted down, and that's something that we've seen from this team over the last week or so in their bad stretch of play. Going 2-6 over their last 8. It's not pretty. And yeah, now the AL Central, it's a 5-game lead for Cleveland over Kansas City, and this division is not going to be won on, June 5th. It's not going to be won at that point in the season. The Royals still have a healthy cushion, as I've continuously said, in the wild card race. Not over Minnesota, but over a team trying to get into the playoffs like Detroit, like Boston, like Tampa. The Royals are still 10 games over 500. Detroit's chasing them, and they're only 1 game over 500. But yeah, for the AL Central to keep pace on it, you can't cough up games like that. And right now, it's because that bullpen, there's no faith in the bullpen. Quite honestly, the Royals had a 5-3 lead going into the 7th inning, and Seth Lugo's at 92, 93, 94 pitches, and Matt Quatrero runs him back out there, and he gives up the game-tying 2-run shot to Tyler Freeman, who had 4 home runs on the year. An unlikely hero, but a hero nonetheless. I honestly didn't hate the move. Who could you go to in a spot like that and feel 100% confident the Royals were going to get out of it with a 2-run lead? I'd rather go with Seth Lugo in that spot. Hindsight's always 20/20. Yeah, I would have pulled him. I would have pulled him because he gave up the 2-run home run. But the Royals went into Sam Long after Lugo. So Sam Long was the first man called upon in the biggest series of the year. That's the state of the bullpen right now. Serpa came in, and it wasn't his fault that Bobby Witt Jr. had the bad decision-making and the throwing error that I think Vinny still should have picked, but it was a bad throw, and if he just would have got the ground ball and thrown it to first in the first place, they're still tied going into the top of the 8th inning. But it just feels like this team, they've certainly overachieved, but man, there are about 4 to 5 games. If the bullpen was just okay, they win those games. And with Sam Long and Angel Serpa, it wasn't really on them, but it's also not throwing strikes. So Sam Long, walked 2, I think, or gave up a hit and walked 1. He couldn't get out of the inning clean. And then Serpa comes in, and as I just mentioned, it was Bobby Witt Jr.'s error that was the difference, and Bobby Witt Jr. took ownership of that in the postgame. But Serpa immediately comes in and walks the first hitter he faces. He walks Naylor. And that is what it feels like with the bullpen right now. There's no easy out for them. And it goes back time and time and again to they can't get the swing and miss. You can't bring in somebody and then boom, he's going to get 1, 2, 3 strikeout. It's not going to happen. They're not going to get ahead in the count right now. And that meltdown, in my opinion, all occurred because Matt Quatrero at this point in time can't trust the bullpen. He tried to squeeze an extra out or two from Seth Lugo, and it burned them, and they melted down after that. The bullpen came in. There was nobody on base, loaded the bases, 3-run score on an error. Don't load the bases. Not trying to make an excuse for Bobby Witt Jr., but, throw strikes, pound the zone. Even if these guys aren't going to, bite at the stuff that you're throwing, sometimes you got to give your defense a chance. And yeah, Serpa gave Bobby Witt Jr. a chance to end that inning, and it cost them 3 runs. But I would have liked Serpa to get the first guy out, not walk the first guy, to load the bases. I would have liked Sam Long to come in and get out of that scoreless, but still it would have been the Royals bullpen versus the Guardians bullpen in the final 2 innings. I would have taken Cleveland every single time. So an absolute meltdown in game 1. There's still 2 more to go in this series, but hard to really feel good about those final 2 games after what occurred last night. We're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, let's talk more about this bullpen and where the Royals can go from here. What J.J. Piccolo said yesterday on a podcast. We'll dive into all that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further, want to give a shout out to one of our sponsors today in FanDuel. Now, with FanDuel, it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And if you're wondering about maybe what to put some money down on, well, the NBA Finals going to begin on Thursday. Boston, a 6.5-point favorite at the Garden. I know I'm going to be in on that action, and even though I'm rooting for Dallas in the situation, I'm going to put a little bit of money down on the spread for that game. And if you also want to bet on baseball, how about for this series with the Royals and the Guardians? Jose Ramirez always seems to hit Kansas City pitching. Probably going to put some money down on Jose Ramirez to get on base more than 1.5 times tonight. Moving on, or I should say moving back onto this bullpen conversation. It's not a good state to be in right now, but I think also the silver lining. I've been wanting to say this over the last couple of episodes, but I wanted to wait till maybe one more blow up, and last night felt like another blow up. The silver lining of the Royals having a struggling bullpen right now and the position that they're in is, I think, moves are going to be made. It's not like they're on the fence of, they might be good enough, they might not be, but let's just see how it all pans out. I think at this point, I would say it's a 99% certainty the Royals are going to make a move or two for this bullpen. And J.J. Piccolo has been very vocal about that. And maybe right now you don't want to hear about it too much. Maybe right now you're frustrated about the guys that he brought in. But the reality is, a lot of those guys are still going to be in the bullpen. Okay, they're not going to just DFA 5 guys and bring in 5 new ones. They're likely going to go after one bullpen guy to really help the back end. And if they can afford it, they can go after a second one. But it still comes down to decision-making of who you move out of that bullpen. They feel like Walter Pennington can provide some reinforcement from Omaha. They feel like Will Klein can really bounce back after that Friday outing, and he did on Sunday. Maybe John McMillan at one point helps this bullpen. But to me, it's going to take outside help, because once they get that outside help, you feel better about games like yesterday when you have a 5-3 lead in the 7th, and it's a no-brainer. You don't need to squeeze an extra 10 pitches out of your starter, even if he is a Cole Reagans or a Seth Lugo. You can go to your bullpen and trust the 7th inning guy to get outs. You can trust the 8th inning guy to get outs, and a closer like a James MacArthur to slam the door. But last night, that completely showed me where the trust level is right now. That you rather gamble with Seth Lugo going through the bottom of the order, which, again, I think most managers would do that if you're facing the 7, 8, and 9 guys, and Will Brennan got him for the second time, and then Tyler Freeman crushed the home run to left center field, and they were tied up, and that was it for Seth Lugo. So probably that factored in. Hey, Seth Lugo, he's done well over the last 2 innings-ish. He escaped that scary situation in the 5th, bases loaded and 1 out, and got Jimenez and Ramirez to strike out. Sixth inning was fine. In the 7th inning, you feel like keep it rolling, get us 3 quick outs, and then we're going to go to John Schreiber and we're going to go to James MacArthur to close out the game. That was likely the hope, but we've seen this a few times now over the last week. Matt Quatrero trying to squeeze an extra inning out of his starter, and by the time he pulls him, it's too late. And that does fall back on the manager. It's always going to. It's your decision to keep a guy out there or to go to the bullpen. But last night, after the game was tied, usually I would say something like, that's just a terrible decision. Why is Lugo going back out with 94 pitches, even if it is the bottom of the order? I didn't know who they would have gone to in the 7th. Serpa was coming off an awful outing on Sunday. John Schreiber would have liked to save for the 8th. I'm not going to Chris Stratton. MacArthur's going to go in the 9th if you have the lead. Who do you go to? And the Royals went with Sam Long, who's thrown 4 innings this year. And had been really good in those 4 innings. And I like what Sam Long brings to this bullpen. But right now, there's not enough guys you can trust in a big spot like that. So I didn't mind Matt Quatrero sticking with Seth Lugo. But this silver lining is a move is going to be made, or 2 moves are going to be made. He was on a podcast with John Heyman yesterday, might have been 2 days ago. But it is speaking of JJ Piccolo. And he was asked about, the deadline, the start to the season, and Bobby Witt Jr. and Salvador Perez. And at a point blank, he said, we don't strike enough guys out in the back end of our bullpen. And right now we're in the beginning of stages of looking for guys who can. And that, to me, when a general manager says that, assistant GM says that, it means that you are maybe not close to making a move, but you are really making waves and sending feelers out there to acquire guys that make sense for this bullpen. And the Royals need power in the bullpen. I sound like a broken record in saying it, but it's the truth. You can get out of jams like last night if you can get the swing and miss. It's not relying on your defense all the time. Even if your defense is great, you need the swing and miss. Why do you think Cleveland's bullpen is so good? They get the swing and miss. They got multiple guys they can go to in the back end. Emmanuel Clase is arguably the best closer in baseball right now. We talk about Mason Miller all the time, but Emmanuel Clase's ERA is video game-esque. He gets the swing and miss. And yeah, the Royals need to find somebody that throws 100 miles an hour and, has a cutter that can shatter pretty much any bat, probably a bat made of steel. But, that's going to be hard to come by. I don't necessarily need the triple digits, but if you can get the swing and miss, if you got the power, that makes last night a lot easier to bridge the gap to your bullpen. Hey, you just got 6 great innings, another quality start for Seth Lugo in a big-time spot in Game 1. He leaves the mound, you go to your power in the bullpen. Hey, you feel good. I think right now they're missing that one guy. They're missing that one guy in the bullpen, whether that be the 7th or the 8th inning, and it allows John Schreiber to go in the 7th or the 8th, and you get to MacArthur in the 9th. I think that is the move that is going to be made, because that is going to significantly increase the trust, the faith, the confidence in the bullpen. It's one guy. I love the way Angel Serpa has looked. I do. I do not want Angel Serpa being the every situation 7th inning guy. I don't. I'd rather there be a power guy you could either have in the 8th inning or the 7th. John Schreiber throws the other. MacArthur's the 9th. And that's what I feel like the Royals are looking to. And then, yeah, if you can add an extra guy, all the better to help out this bullpen a little bit more. But you look at this 2-6 stretch, a lot of it falls on the bullpen. The Royals should be able to hold 5-0 leads. And yeah, Lugo gave up 3, but he still gave up only 3 runs in 6 innings. You should be able to turn to the bullpen in that spot and trust them to get the final 9 outs of the game. Right now, they can't. They can't get it done. I don't trust a 5-run lead, a 4-run lead, a 1-run lead. I don't even trust like a 6 or 7-run lead right now. I even said last night the Royals offense needed more after it was 5-0. They didn't get it done. They lose 8-5 in that meltdown in Cleveland. Okay, before we move on to our final segment of the show, I want to give a shout out to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring in the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you canvas analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. When we come back, there is an aspect that we once worried about and feared about not turning things around. I'm going to tell you why I'm not too worried about it anymore. We'll dive into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can always find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And you can find us on wherever you get your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts. We're on Odyssey and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. Before we go any further, I want to let you know about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Well, a little bit of a reminder before we dive back into this final segment. I said before the ad, before this, another episode coming tonight. We are going to do that after the game, probably a recap of just all what happened in Game 2 of this series. Brady Singer taking the bump. It'll be Nick Sandlin starting for Cleveland, a bullpen arm, and then they're probably going to use him as the opener and go to maybe a Logan Allen, who was scheduled to start. But Cleveland shaking things up because of the struggles that Logan Allen has had. So I think a really good move made by Stephen Vogt, who's been awesome in year one as manager of the Cleveland Guardians. But another episode coming tonight. You want to get one out this morning because we didn't last night have one. So you have your morning episode and then tonight's episode. We got the camera situation fixed. Hopefully the audio sounds good on your guys' end. But much better situation today to be in than I was last night. Traveling all over for work and then getting in too late. Not going to have to worry about that the rest of the week. Well, we just had the negative aspects of the Royals, which is the bullpen. That seems to be the highlighter. That seems to be the giant sign outside of a building that just catches your eye immediately. When you're not playing well, what is it? Well, it's the bullpen. The bullpen's not looking too good. Guys are struggling. Guys that were more so reliable at the beginning of the year are not so reliable anymore. But, and I'm not just saying this to make light of a situation or be too optimistic. If you are to be struggling, you'd rather it be your bullpen than your rotation or your offense, because the bullpen is the easiest thing to go out and fix. That's just one man's opinion. But the bullpen is usually the cheapest. There's a lot of guys out there on the market, and you're not going to have to give up an arm and a leg. Kind of goes hand in hand with saying that it's the cheapest option out there. You know, the Royals offense to me is not perfect. It's flawed. There are guys that completely drag down the rest of the hitters. The bottom of the lineup isn't very good. But you look at the top four. Okay, you have Maikel Garcia, Bobby Witt Jr., Salvador Perez, and Vinny Pasquantino. Vinny Pasquantino has been on a tear. Maikel Garcia has really been able to bounce back well after his cold stretch in April. He had a fantastic May. Salvador Perez, a career season. Bobby Witt Jr. pacing for an 8-9 WAR season. Like, there's not many top fours that are playing this well right now. The Royals have a very good top four. And then your fifth hitter fluctuates from time to time. But Nelson Velasquez, he can run into a few. He may not be the most polished hitter, but he's probably going to finish, if he plays all season long, around 20 home runs. Again, there's worse spots to be in. They could have had Michael Massey still, but Michael Massey's still dealing with his back issue, and I would have felt good about the top six. And Hunter Renfroe, since May 12th, has been what they wanted him to be all season long. So even Hunter Renfroe is not really the eyesore anymore. It's just two hitters to me that have kind of become black holes. That's MJ Melendez and Kyle Isbell, and both those guys didn't play last night. The offense, to me, when you just look at runs scored, you look at, RBIs, you look at OPS, on base percentage, it's never going to be great with the Royals because it feels like they far more value not striking out and not really walking too much. But Salvador Perez is walking more at a high rate. Bobby Wood Jr. is walking more, it feels like. And some of those guys that once they get into a groove of Vinny Pasquantino, even at times in Nelson Velasquez, those walk rates can go up a little bit more than what they're at right now. But to me, I'm not overly concerned. I think that, there might be some feast and famine to it. But in this bad stretch of play, the offense has been fine to me. They've had their moments. They had that one-run showing against Tampa in the finale a few weeks back. They had only, 3 runs on Saturday against the Padres, and it all came early in the game and really nothing late. They've had their moments, but right now I don't chalk it up to being the offense struggling. It's the bullpen. It's all the bullpen. And I would say that a move could be made to bring in a starter for the outfield to mask the struggles made by MJ Melendez. But right now you're seeing at least one of the outfield guys in Hunter Renfroe getting a little bit hot. Over the last month or so, or a little bit under a month, he's been fine. And even though Hunter Renfroe kind of was the whipping boy for a little bit, can't really be right now. He's been fine. He's hitting all right. And the Royals could make a move, but when I've been asked about, is it the bullpen they need to make a move for, or is it the outfield? It's the bullpen to me. I think this Royals team is 4 to 5 wins better with a top 5 bullpen. They don't have a top 5 bullpen, and they likely won't have a top 5 bullpen, but they can add in talent that makes things a hell of a lot easier on everybody else. You can hang on to those 1-run leads, those 2-run leads, because that's what it really is when it comes to the end of the season. Have you been able to hang on to those 1-run leads, those 2-run leads, not just against divisional rivals, against good teams you're facing? And the Royals in this bad stretch of play, 2-6 over their last 8, or actually, I think they're 2-7 because you count that loss against Tampa. Right after the winning streak, they've gone 2-7. It just feels like they've had more than a few slip away. That series finale in Tampa, they had a lead. You look at the game on Thursday against Minnesota, should have won. They were up 4-0. He split that series against Minnesota. They led on Friday night against San Diego, should have won that game. Should have taken the series against San Diego. And you should have won game 1 in Cleveland. But the bullpen imploded. All of those games, bullpen completely melted down. That, to me, is the issue. That is what needs to be fixed. But the offense, I'm not too worried about, honestly. They might be hit and miss, but this is kind of who they are. They're 62 games into the season. There's 100 to go. 100 more games in the Major League Baseball season. The Royals are 10 games over 500. I get for some people last night was your breaking point. It drove you to the edge. Maybe you jumped off. But there still are things that can be fixed, and everybody's got things to fix. But you're also on June 8th, and this team holds a playoff spot by a pretty good margin. Last night, those games are going to be infuriating, but there's still a chance they can improve that aspect of their team, and they can get back to a great stretch of play. Everybody goes through the bad stretches. Right now, the Royals are in one. The Royals are really in a tough stretch. And it's not necessarily happening at the worst time. For chasing the division, yes. But they had a big cushion before this bad stretch of play, and being 15 games over 500, now just 10. We'll see how they bounce back, though, coming up tonight. Brady Singer will take the ball. He'll face off against Nick Sandlin of Cleveland. Game 2 will be at 5:40 p.m. Central Time, and they'll wrap up that series with Cleveland tomorrow at 12:10, I think it is. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson, and you can always find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to let you know one last time about Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV Channels app. Well, tonight we're going to have our second episode of the day. That'll come to you after this Game 2 showing against the Cleveland Guardians. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.